So, first of all, good morning to all. If I have not already said good morning loudly, so good morning. First point, that room's near empty, this room's not. Awesome, you're in the right place. I was actually a little bit concerned. The title, as you may have seen, was much cooler of that room. I had all sorts of cool words. This is, I think, a little bit more down on the ground, rubber meets the road of a session. What I specifically mean by that is we're going to be looking at a lot of content. All right, this is a less than an hour as of current workshop. I don't want you to think that this is the last time we're ever going to be able to speak about this kind of content. Full ROI modeling, it's a lot of depth to it. We're going to be looking at snippets of a full scope model. The model itself I have been building for approximately four and a bit months, so a lot of work has gone into it. Good news is that you guys will all receive the entire model. It's an Excel workbook, right? Other good news is that we are already starting to build elements into the platform. So this is the step one. In time, more will be built into the platform. The model itself covers a lot more than just the project level or just the idea level. So just be cognizant that what we're covering today is a snippet. You guys can reach out to me directly, all of you, for any question. We can make some more time. But you get the full model. You have plenty of time to walk through it in depth. You can ask me any question. This is going to be recorded. We also have this deck itself, which will be sent to all of you. So far, so good? All right. Getting started then. What is the most important word on that slide? Value. I heard it over here. Most got it wrong. What was the word? No, who said it? Somebody said it. Starts with an A. Accountability. Okay, accountability. Who here is an innovation program manager or managing their program, coordinating their program? Who runs the show? All right. Are you guys accountable for your program? Yes. Does the buck stop there with you guys? Yep. Do you have a full scope program ROI model? All right. So none of you are actually accountable then. This is foundational. The ROI model is foundational to your accountability, and there's a lot of reasons why. In the presentation today, we're going to spend a little bit of time on the why, and I think all of you guys are bought in on the why aspect, why you should build this, but we're still going to focus a little bit of attention on it. I'm going to bring up a couple of the reasons, or the top reasons I've heard why not to build a model. I'm going to make sure those are not considered correct. And then we're going to go into the how piece. The how piece, as mentioned, it's pretty deep, so this is just snippets today. I'm going to walk through some of the calculations that we have built into the model overall. But again, there's not enough time to cover all the elements. We're going to give the snippets and make sure you guys have the foundation of how to build this yourselves, all right? Or why not, for that matter. Something I've heard quite a few times. We're not interested in ROI now. It's too early, right? Has anybody bought a car ever? Yes. Has anybody bought insurance for that car? Are you buying insurance because you expect you're going to need it tomorrow? Are you buying insurance because you want to be prepared for when the time comes that you might need that insurance? The program ROI model, the building of this full scope program ROI, one of the main elements of it, it's your insurance, right? At some point, someone's going to ask you questions. You need to have a response. That's the other team's job, right? So generally speaking, there are different groups within any business that perhaps deal more with the financial aspects, right? You guys might not be, corporate finance controllers, know how to build these models. I've geared it towards, as far as possible, plug and play. You don't need to be experts in the numbers. You just need to be able to do it, and we're, of course, going to help you in terms of how to do it. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to accountability, you guys are going to be asked those questions. It's not the finance person that's crunching the numbers and then figuring out whatever that ROI could be. You guys are accountable. The buck stops with you. So keep that in mind. ROI kills innovation. Has anybody heard that before? ROI does kill innovation. The key is that you are going to be creating the buffer, creating the environment through this program model, this program ROI model, so that when people do ask that question, it doesn't result in the death of innovation. Your response could be, what's your program ROI? We're not sure yet. Does anybody feel good about that response? Would you tell your boss, I'm not sure yet? Alternatively, we're currently forecasting a 43% return on investment by end year 2. based on projects selected from our first 3 initiatives. All of this is action-oriented, right? Keyword forecasting. Our long-term target is upwards of 300% by end year 5. We're on track, but we could do better if we had. That gives you a massive opportunity. You're currently projecting towards the future. You're saying, we could do all this great stuff, 43% in 2 years, greater than 300 in 5. We could do more if we had more people, more resources, more time, more money, more whatever. You're creating opportunity to ask a question that whatever it is that you may need, the ROI model is helping you to be able to ask that question with some reality, some grounding, some facts, right? This one is the most common. I don't know how, right? Again, this is not meant to be easy. Building a full model is not easy. It will take time. It took me 4+ months to build the foundation. It's going to take you guys some time to build out your variants. We're going to start with the how piece today, now. We're not going to be done, right? But we're going to get started, and we're going to drive it forward as we progress week after week, day after day, right? Step 1. When you're building this model, you have to understand there's levels to the whole thing, right? It's not just a project, it's not just an idea, and it's not, at the end of the day, a final scope program with nothing else involved. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. There's 4 layers. The overall program looks something like this. It looks pretty simple, right? I got MS Paint, I opened it up, I put a bunch of lines, I made some colors, and we're all set. What's going on behind the scenes of these 2 little lines is 4.5 months of effort and a lot of data. We're going to start walking through it today. Can anybody tell me what this wonderfully colored purple line represents?
Projection.
No? That's your runway. You're plotting towards the future, you're creating space. It is a projection, it is forecasting the future, but at the end of the day, you're creating space, you're creating time, you're creating a future of possibilities. Can anybody tell me what the little green line is? What? That's you guys exceeding expectations. Reference our good folks at General Electric. 5 billion in 10 years, actually 5 billion in 9 months. Now, I'm not saying everyone in this room is going to drive 5 billion into the business. That would be awesome. Their runway was 10 years. They achieved it in they're going to be achieving it, they're delivering it in 9 months or more than that. But at the end of the day, you're creating a runway, and it creates the opportunity space for you guys to run faster, push harder, get the job done, and exceed expectations, right? We're about to start getting deep into the pieces now, focusing first, working backwards on the project level. So what is a project? The project is what is actually being implemented, right? So we saw the initial variant in terms of what we're building on the product. It's the plugging in of the final potential benefit and the costs that are associated. Obviously, that's not coming out of thin air. You're taking time to build that. But 2 elements, very important elements that go into the project level is your implementation cost and the time to realize, right? No matter what is selected, it's going to take some amount of time to drive it forward, and obviously it's going to take some cost to drive it forward, right? That amount of time, and as you saw in the exponential curve, we'll explain what that exactly is towards the end of the workshop, that time needs to be factored for. But in essence, you saw the slump in the beginning. If we just take a quick step back, this slump right here, you're in the negative because you need time to implement no matter what. You are factoring for that at the project level for starters, right? Now, in terms of a project, what that will look like approximately. Again, this is a snippet. This is a slimmed down model. We wouldn't have time to get into all the pieces of the puzzle, but we're going to walk through a potential sample, right? So let's make believe, a little imagination. Company A, fictitious company A, fictitious project X, right? And right now it's today. So we haven't done anything yet. We're an IPM. We're scoping out the business. We're saying, okay, what can we work on over here? We look at this project, this potential piece of the business, a product or a service, whatever it is. Cost per unit is 5K, right? Whatever, technical, whatever it is, 5K. Take a step down. If we were to break down that cost, we can see, in essence, the elements that are involved in putting together this unit. You're also seeing opportunity areas for you guys to do something. Could be a challenge, could be hackathon, could be whatever, right? That this could be something that you focus on. You go have a chat with a potential sponsor, you say, listen, assembly cost, we know Overall, this is a noisy space. Putting the pieces together, again, reference GE. I think it was 852 pieces versus 12. That's a massive reduction in assembly. Again, fictitious, could be anything, but in this case, let's focus on assembly and say, Mr. and Mrs. Sponsor, let's take a moment to focus on this area, see what we can do. Let's say our target is a $100 reduction. So from 600, we want to go to 500, right? So you're starting to build the foundations of your project and the costings. Obviously, you're going to have to ask people questions about this. Let's say you run with it, you keep going, you break it all down, you say, okay, at the end of the day, based on us selling this product, we have a total profit of 70 million. So that's the business altogether running to provide that at the end of the day. We're focusing on just assembly, $100 reduction. That's our challenge, perhaps, right? This little tiny snippet of the big picture. Take it a step further. Let's say we don't even meet the $100 reduction target. Let's say we get a $50 reduction. So from 600, we're now cost of assembly, 550. It sounds tiny, right? A $50 reduction. You guys got to remember that every single idea that might have this tiny incremental tweak, when you add it all together, your overall gross versus, and I've put on purpose a very large implementation cost. Let's say $250K goes to our implementation of this $50 reduction. When you put the pieces together, you're still looking at it. This is correct math, right? 250K is your net benefit, including the implementation cost of this individual project, right? Again, this isn't going to be, this is a pretty straightforward calculation. Obviously, it gets more complicated with all the moving parts. This is the work entailed in building the first step of this model, right? Looking at the project level. You're going to have to ask a lot of questions. You're eventually going to get some data. You're going to be able to plug in this information. Key item, implementation time. So we're having the conversation with the team that is going to go and try to implement this. Let's say we think it'll take 10 months, right? So you've already plugged in projection, potential actualization, and the time it'll take to get there. Things might tweak, get changed along the line, right? You're going to keep updating, but you have your base. That's your starting point. Next piece, scale up. So obviously we ran a challenge. Whatever it might have been, in this case it was a solve challenge, let's say. You ran a challenge, took time, took effort, people were involved, all the different pieces of that puzzle. You're now getting the net benefit of the project, looping it in to your overall initiative. You're going to remove all those costs as well. You're still using the 250K, 10-month time frame, right? You're going to start, okay, how many SMEs did we have involved? Challenge managers, sponsors, etc. Starting to get deep now, all right? What that could look like. 250K, we start there. Let's say we applied some marketing incentive costs, right? So we had a marketing campaign. We had a pretty robust 5K incentive, whatever that could have been. It could be parsed out, it could be an iPad, whatever it was, right? So already, prior to running this challenge, a lot of you will think 5K incentive, like that's a pretty big cost. You got to think bigger. You got to think longer. That if we can actually achieve that $50 reduction, it adds up to 250K. 5K is nothing at the end of the day, right? This is where it gets real deep. This is a tiny snippet of the model. You'll see when you receive it, there's a lot more there. But SME costs, those are a lot of people involved, a lot of time. We're breaking everything down. The model has this already built in. You won't have to build it again. How many ideas were submitted? Solve, so it's pretty targeted. We're not expecting 5,000 ideas. Let's say 250 ideas. There's a piece that I haven't plugged in here, which is the first layers of evaluation. I've skipped right to the second evaluation, which would be your scorecard, the in-depth review. So we're working with 25 ideas across all of our SMEs. We're going to get their salaries, and we're going to calculate the time involved. We're going to calculate that to a time spent per evaluation, per idea, per hour. We're factoring for everything. At the end of the day, if we look at this spread, total cost of that challenge, again, remember the 250K, $50 reduction, 250K net benefit, including implementation. 40K approximately for running the challenge. All these numbers sound big in the beginning. It costs us 40K to run a challenge, including all the people, all the pieces to that initiative. It sounds like a lot. 250K is where you're going, though, so you're still fine. Service lines. You have a project that occurs, that sits, that was found within an initiative. You guys are all providing services to your business. Multiple different services. One could be your solve service line. Lots of challenges like this one. We'll talk about that momentarily. Could be an optimized service line, hackathon service line, incubate service line, whatever it is. But you're going to have multiple lines of services provided to the business Each one of those will have initiatives. Each one of those will have projects, perhaps multiple projects per initiative. Lots of pieces to this puzzle, and I'm pretty sure you guys are starting to look like Steve Martin with too much data. Go.
Just a quick question for the last slide that you had up on calculating, cost per challenge. Will we be able to kind of backwards track that more or less? Like if we have a challenge that we just completed recently, will we be able to use this information to see what it costs to do a challenge that we already did?
So I'll just repeat the question. Can we retroactively capture the cost that went into a challenge from some point in the past? Simple answer is if you have the data, yes. The model is built that you can plug and play. So if you have the data, if you can approximate the amount of time spent per the SMEs, you're good. Now I've plugged in this scenario, 1 hour per scorecard individual idea evaluation. So, and I'm not showing it here, you guys will see it. Scorecard is an in-depth evaluation, right? You're getting a single idea and you're vetting it across multiple different questions. What is the potential implementation cost? What is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to take time by your SMEs. So I'm plugging in 1 hour per idea per SME. With a simpler evaluation, it might take less. So with the initial review, the single scale evaluation, if you guys remember, I put 15 minutes on that. So every single idea goes through 15 minutes of evaluation. If you have the data, yes. If you don't have the data, then you can start now.
Right.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Please stop me at any point. I know this is pretty deep. Go ahead.
That 1 hour per question seems very excessive per idea.
I've specifically put it pretty high. I mean, it depends on the idea. At the end of the day, solve, you'd expect. So this is also a level of, a certain idea is expected from an optimized challenge, perhaps not as refined, not as developed, and you're going to be doing more down the line. Solve, you'd expect that the ideas are coming in pretty well defined. They're potentially technical. There's a lot of moving parts. So I've upped the expectation in terms of evaluation time. I've also purposely been a little bit, what's the word, quote unquote safe in terms of the amount of time these people would be spending. Like I think you can be safe, and in creating your runway, you're going to be safe, and that you want to scale up and you want to think, okay, if this could take maximum time from all the people involved, let's build for that, and then we're creating that opportunity space to exceed the expectations, right? Maybe it would be shorter, maybe they'd be more efficient. One of the pieces we're going to look at next, apologies, on the service line, I don't want to jump too far ahead and I'll track back, but what you're going to see is as you start scaling up, so let's say we run 3 initiatives in the year, where this is all forecast. We're creating that opportunity space, right? Let's say we plan for 3 in year 1, 5 in year 2, 7 in year 3, right? And this is a 5-year model. I've just got a snippet here. As people start, and I'll talk about all this, I want to focus on this momentarily, these 2 lines, right? You can see the cost is reducing. Time is reducing. It means we're getting better at what we're doing. It takes less time, less effort. We're building expertise. We're creating more time for ourselves to do more in the future, right? So if we run 3 solve in year 1, it'll take us, in this case, 300 hours, perhaps. And this is us. This is the challenge team. In year 2, it'll take us less time. In year 3, it'll take us, we're becoming higher level experts, right? We'll walk through this step by step. Going back to our service lines then. You got your project, right? $250K. Costed us approximately $40K on the initiative itself. All of you guys are spending time equals money on this overall program. You're spending time in the service lines, you're going and having these, all of your costs need to be factored in as well, right? Your whole team, all the efforts, maybe you'd have marketing marketing costs just on the program, right? The model is built to factor for every single possible cost. If there isn't something in there, you tell me and I'll put it in there, right? First piece of the puzzle. What do we want to work with over the next few years? This is, you can play it safe. I forgot who it was, 18 per year. Which one was that from the? US Bank. 18 per year, that's awesome. What if they had 18 per year? This model is based on 3, 5, and 7. What if you run 18? You have 18 possibilities of 250K. It's not always going to be a perfect scenario. You get 250K, obviously. But volume. You got to run fast. You got to keep trying. Software consulting. If you guys want to hire me because I'm super great, obviously that's going to cost something. Software itself, obviously that costs something. It's all factored in. How many admins? It's all built into the model, right? Scaled year on year. So hopefully I do my job well. You guys don't need me year 2 and 3. That's not great for a bright idea, but it's good for you, right? Software, obviously, you're still going to need it. Potentially, the software scales up. You can build that into the model as well. So the software costs of more admins. If you guys are doing your job right, you're going to have more admins, more cost, also built in. I know this is a lot of data. First thing we're going to look at, program manager. Every single engagement, almost every single engagement I've started, the first call is, how much time are you allocating to the program? I'd love to hear we're 100% team of 3, ready to go, ready to run. Rare. Most of the time, and I've heard some things, and they were mentioned yesterday, 25%, 20%, 50%, 10%. I have a certain opinion towards that, but nevertheless, if it's 10%, you're going to factor for 10%. Maybe you should factor for 20% because we all know what kind of work goes into this. In this scenario, a project manager is 50% allocated, and they're spending 50% of their time additionally just on solve, which means they're doing something else. You guys maybe, I don't know, whatever other project you'll be doing within the overall space of the program, 50% of your time overall as a person, as a business person, is spent on the program. 50% of that is spent on your solve service line. The whole team gets that same structure. So you're going to the depth of exactly how much time are we spending, not only on the program, but also on the individual service lines, and you're going to parse that out. I haven't highlighted, but in this case, program team number 1 is 100% on solve. Maybe someone else is 100% on hackathon. Maybe someone else is 100% on whatever, right? You're factoring for all of that. Again, in time you get better. Remember the $250K from the project. The initiative cost, $40K. Overall service line in this case, to run solve 3 per year, $75K on just your side. 3 solves per year, that's the $250K adding up, you're still way in the green, right? You got to think, if you plot this out and you show someone this potential future, they're going to come scammering to you with, can we run a challenge? When can we do any sponsors? All your leadership is going to be 100% engaged. Everybody's going to be running towards you. Can we do something now? How much more do you need? Remember, if we had X. This is creating that opportunity space for whatever X might be for you, right? Most important thing when you're building this model and you're explaining it. We just saw all this 500 plus money, all this money is everywhere money. Time to implement. You're not going to see any of that for a while. You're going to be in the negative. This is all rolled up right now. If we just ran solve as a service line, we wouldn't see any of that in this model. It's built out for the entire future, 5 years out. But you're going to be in the negative for the first year, potentially second, depending on how fast you're moving, right? So the time to implement is finally factored in. So just to have that expectation when you show this, you're not going to be making money tomorrow because it's going to take time to do all of this. But eventually, as long as you show this and you create that opportunity space for the future, everybody's going to come to you. Does that make sense? Yeah? Who wants to think bigger? I see one back there. Questions?
So as someone who is new to Bright Idea, so just tell me how this, is this being rolled out now? Has this always existed? What is the change?
So as of current, we've just deployed an enhanced functionality at the project and their idea level, which we saw in the beginning, was also showed yesterday. This is now, so after my 4 months of brain work and my brainchild here as the workbook that you guys are going to receive, that's going to be built in time into the full platform. So this is currently the full model. The project level is already in. But the full model at an initiative level, at a service line level, in the full scope program, piece by piece, we're building all of it in. It's going to take time, of course.
And the timeline for that,
To be defined. Lots of moving parts.
Okay.
As you saw yesterday, we're doing all sorts of fun stuff.
Great. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, how do you take into consideration the fact that projects have a life cycle? I mean, when you run a program, you run a challenge, you get ideas. Mm-hmm. You estimate benefits for ideas. That is a very bad quality estimate up front because you have an idea, you don't have a project. You run that idea through the whole process, you take it through the lab, and whatever, and the quality of that number changes and goes getting better or worse, depending on how you work on the spreadsheet on that project. You're developing a project. So you arrive at a point where you have an MVP thing, and you're going to hand over that to a PMO kind of organization to implement. At that point in time, you spent 8 months with the idea on a pipeline, working on it, and the number has changed significantly on the way. It's your job to change the number.
Correct.
Make it better. So how does this, I mean, this is kind of a static thing, and it's a very dynamic process, the valuation of the portfolio.
Exactly for that reason is why we have started with the project level and it's already built into the platform. So as you are tracking projects in time, as they are being implemented, whatever stage they may be in, an MVP, POC, whatever initials we want to use, you will, whether it's the program team directly or an implementation team or a labs, whatever it is, but you will always have the capacity to update those figures, and it's always going to be tracked back. So if you recall, basically there's a revision history. So you will always have a history of exactly what was updated, when it was updated, who updated it. So this little fella, save a new version, right? So in time, you're always going to be updated. The model right now is, as long as you're plugging in the data here, which is the centerpiece, this is the most important and possibly the most complicated. Always there's going to be moving parts. It might be a better estimate in the future, might not be, depending on, we make decisions as we progress, right? This is the starting point. The rest of the model, if you guys are spending a ton of time on it, you're going to factor for it in the model, and you can factor for it. It's literally just updating a single figure. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, but the issue is, I mean, I want to compare my program cost and my program ROI to evaluation of the whole portfolio.
Yep.
I mean, I have 5 challenges, I have 100 ideas in each. And on the funnel, at the same time, you have ideas that have a very bad quality of estimate of benefits. They just came in. You know, somebody said, hey, this is going to have an ROI of, I don't know, $2 million over a year period. And that number is really good for nothing, I mean, at that point in time. So, and what's the probability of that project getting through the process and being part of the 5% of implementations that you have on a funnel? If you have 100 ideas, 10 projects, 5 implementations, 95 of those projects got lost on the way. So how do you account for that dynamic modification of the portfolio valuation? Because you want to compare your program to your expected value of the portfolio. And that means adding up the ROI of each project in the stage it is in and multiplying that by some kind of probability of that project getting implemented. So you know, like a CRM funnel on a customer thing, same thing. You have idea funnels, you have a probability of conversion, and you have a conversion rate depending on how your projects advance on the funnel. So you can't really put a number on each project. You have a number and a probability of that process happening, of that project happening in the end, which is conversion rates on the funnel. You know.
So generally speaking, the workbook isn't going to answer those questions. The workbook is a tool. Obviously, people need to answer those questions. You can apply, for example, risk-adjusted net present value. That is actually something that it's already in discussion, and that's something that, in time, I'm looking at our product person over there, in time we will get there. As of current, you guys, I mean, for sure at the idea stage, if you are asking an end user, an idea submitter about the potential, you're generally not expecting that to be the final. I mean, you know it in advance, especially if it's just a regular or any random employee. They're not going to really know how to project towards that. But you're still capturing the data. You're still building that model, and exactly what you just said to me is all the risks of maybe we're wrong, maybe something gets killed down the line, maybe the entire company decides to shift focus and it's just not important. There's a lot of unknowns that could happen. You're still tracking. You're still creating that future space. You're still creating the opportunity for you guys to do more. The tool is never going to answer are we going to be accurate 100%? Sure. No one. You go to a VC, I need $1 million. They'll go and crunch those numbers and they'll say, well, we'll give you 200K, but we need 40, whatever it is. They're also making a guess. Everybody's making a guess, but it's an educated guess, and at least for sure you're showing this is where we could be. All right? Everybody knows that at the end of the day it might not be 100%. Does that make sense?
Hello. Well, first of all, thank you for this. I think this is a great start. You know, we have to start somewhere. It's not going to, be perfect or capture everything right off, but I think this is a great start. One of the questions I had is because I think with programs in different stages, some folks aren't going to be coming in year one. They're going to potentially be leveraging this many years out. As the user community, are there going to be times when there might be calls for, hey, how are you using the ROI? What, we're looking for new ideas, new suggestions, so we can maybe be targeting what most people need first off. Is there going to be that engagement going forward with this particular application?
You mean the workbook and between myself and,
just
of course.
the calls out there, so we'll know where you are on the roadmap and when's a good time. So, because sometimes with the roadmap, we don't want to miss the sweet spot with the product team if there's something we really want.
For sure. So you can contact me whenever you want.
Okay.
For sure, you can reach out to me, and that's part of this. I don't expect you guys to just get the workbook and then we're done. I'd expect that you guys are going to have some questions. That's why I'm here. That's why I spent the 4 months. That's why our product team is going to be spending more time. Of course, we're available. That's our job. So short answer, yes.
Okay. I was just wondering if there was going to be more structured reach out so we know if there's a particular time frame to meet a certain release or be under consideration.
To be defined.
Okay.
It's a list. It's a long list. It's in the list.
Okay.
It's a priority in the list. Obviously, this is a full workshop, so it is definitely a priority.
Okay.
But I'm glad you're that interested. That's a good thing. I think that means that we're doing the right thing. We got one back there, and then we'll come over here.
Yeah. Hi. Again, thank you. Again, this is a good start. A couple of questions. One is anyone or are you planning to measure the amount of time people are spending inputting ideas and working on them and so on? Because that's part of the ROI. We get asked how much time are people spending on coming up with ideas and working on these as well, not just the program managers but the employees. That's one question. And another question is, can you shed some light on how to measure softer metrics? We have challenges that are more culture or people challenges. It's not always hard engineering type of stuff like building, give me ideas for building a bolder culture or whatever it might be. Can you shed some light on how people are measuring the outcomes of those?
Sure. So, starting backwards there's your hard metrics or your hard ROI, and then there's your soft, quote unquote, soft ROI. I am of the opinion, and this is fact, that everything can be factored for, everything can be calculated. Now, when it comes to the soft measures like engagement, for example, one of the things that I personally we're in discussion with product, but I think it should be a very next step, is turning engagement into a more tangible, a hard metric. In essence, it's quite commonly understood that an actively engaged employee is between 17 and 21% more productive, right? So productivity itself can be measured. This is coming from Gallup. The most recent was, I think, 2016 study. We've been looking at those numbers. Currently, the model is not factoring in that level because there's a lot of that's a deeper build, let's say. Now, I think it will. I can't directly answer, but for sure the calculation can be made, and I'm more than happy to work with whoever wants to work on these details to build that structure out. There's productivity, there's an absenteeism factor, there's a retention, there's a lot of additional factors just from engagement, employee engagement alone. So if you were to consider culture as affecting employee engagement and changes towards culture as linked into that, there is something that can be tangibly measured, but it's a even deeper calculation that would take more time. We're definitely happy to work on that with you guys. Now, in regards to the first point, which was, what was the first question now, Rodney? Almost had it.
Are you measuring the time people are spending on?
Yes. So there's no control on that item. So whether employees spend 5 minutes or 5 hours, whether it's 5 employees or 5,000, there's no direct way to gauge that prior to. There's only after the fact, right? Now, if you want to get to that stage of tracking, it is very, very deep, and it's hard to get to if you have 5,000 people and you assume 5 minutes or 5 hours, it's very hard to build that in. I don't suggest building it in. I think you shouldn't. It's completely up to the employees if they want to engage. If you want to, though, just be cognizant that the number is very large. Depending on if you have a very engaged audience, that bubbles up quite a bit. Again, more than happy to work on that with you. We had Brian over here.
This is just to piggyback piggyback just
Okay,
off
sure.
of what he was asking. So, and I'm not sure if I understood the question differently. Are we able to measure, or is there a way to measure the actual team members that are
Yes.
truly working the ideas, not the ones that are being engaged or that are engaging on the ideas, but from like as an innovation leader or manager, how do I measure my team that's actually working the ideas, the time that they're spending, how long they're on those?
Short answer, yes. That was the service line. So we can talk about it later. Yes. Specifically in the previous question, it was about the employees, the submissions of ideas, and the people that were at that level. So team, for sure, we're factoring for all of that. Okay? Does that answer the question?
I had another
I just want to make sure. Did that answer the question clearly?
Part of it. So I'm talking more so about the system, actually. So right.
System, not
right,
yet.
the system that's actually tracking what my team is doing, not the user or not the submitter of the idea, but the actual team that's working it. Will the system be able to track how long they were in an idea, how many comments they made on ideas, or how long they spent on this project? Is that something like
Not yet.
that'll be built out?
It's factored for in the workbook. So if you can get the data, yes, or approximate the data, it's not currently in the platform. But specifically to the employees, not the team members, but the employees, that's a whole different can of beans. The team members and anybody involved, yes, it's not in the platform yet.
Okay. No, I just wanted to share how we're doing it on the idea submission hours cost. We find that spontaneous ideas don't come in a lot. So we do a lot of ideation workshops,
Yes.
a whole lot of them.
Yes.
4-hour workshops with people sitting there using Scamper or something to come up with ideas for a specific challenge. So you can measure that. How many people sat there, 4 hours each? You can actually do that. Adds up to thousands of hours, I can tell you that. I mean, you got 50 people sitting there, 4 hours, starts adding up. And you do a whole lot of challenges in specific groups to add ideas. We have a target. Every person that sits there submits an idea, at least one. You get a lot of ideas, and you don't get those numbers of ideas if you just let the thing spontaneously happen. It just won't happen. People are doing their job every day, so they don't submit ideas unless you do a lot of workshops. That's
There's
what we
definitely
found.
different ways to do it.
You can certainly measure those.
For sure, if you're running a workshop, you have a much more controlled environment,
yeah.
right?
You can measure
When it's just anyone, anytime, from the employees involved perspective, that's where it gets. Brian, over here. I know you've been waiting. However, I haven't shown you here because this is just snippets. There is a whole section in the workbook for the what we call ad hoc costs. E.g., if you're running workshops, they're not directly linked. They potentially might not be directly linked to a service line, or maybe you'd have a full separate service line, but there is also a space to plug in the cost of the workshop itself, or whatever it might be. So cost of buying coffee. Yes. Shoot.
Okay.
I think this is the last question, depending on, we got 2 minutes.
Okay, so I realize that the model that you have here is really oriented towards the solve use case.
Yes.
Right. So yes.
The model itself is expanded to more.
So in my company, we're not doing the time-bound challenges. We have more of the always-on. And what we're finding in that is that in a lot of cases, the ideas that are coming in are actually lined up with some other project that was already ongoing. So I'm a bit challenged to figure out how can I calculate ROI in that kind of a situation, because those projects would have happened
You don't.
without.
That's not, there's no additional benefit. If the project is already in flight,
Yeah.
I mean, the correct thing to do is to stop the idea from, it's not going to move into evaluations. If it is exactly the project that's moving in flight, you have some other options there in terms, I mean, that goes outside of ROI tracking. That's more so the program structure and making sure you communicate to the person. But generally speaking, you're not tracking an ROI on something that is already in flight, already being done. The idea would not progress to a project because it's already a project.
Right.
Unless there's an addition there to the existing project. That's a whole different space as well. If it's an addition, then you got to do the math on that. What does that addition bring to the table?
Right.
And that would be probably a discussion with the project team involved. Again, this isn't the model itself isn't doing the math for anyone. The numbers still need to be defined. Like the very first slide that we saw, like cost is 5K and breaking it down and what is the benefit, that still needs to be done. But if you can do the math, if you have the numbers, they get plugged in and you will have that 5 years out. Make sense?
Yes, it does.
It's 11. For those that had additional questions, I think we close at 11, right? Is it the next one? Oh, we have more time. I thought it was till 11, sorry. Go, keep going. Next, Stephanie. Oh, maybe not.
Just a quick question, if you go back to the project summary page, how is that all manually filled out by the project submitter, or I guess where is that data coming from? And then the second part of that, is that able to be kind of uploaded? Like, let's say a lot of companies have a different system of record that track project financials.
Yep.
Would we be able to take data and kind of upload it into the Bright Idea system to fill out that project summary information to make sure our two systems are matching up?
Importing? Short answer, soon, perhaps. So on the first piece, in terms of running the calculations, yes, you can run them any way you want, anywhere you want. Right now, the platform is plugging in this number right here, and the cost. The two numbers, the implementation cost, or whatever costs are associated, and the benefit. Now, how exactly you calculate this, it's going to be completely different per scenario. So we're not factoring for that in the platform, potentially yet. On the second piece, in terms of if they're stored somewhere else, currently there isn't an import, as far as I'm aware. So there is no import function on that, but there might be. Currently, no.
I have a follow-up question.
Go ahead. Need the mic.
Hi, I'm Allison Heisner. I'm on the product team at Bright Idea. So I have a question back to the audience related to that. Unfortunately, there is no import function right now. But I'm curious, so you asked the question, would the submitter fill in these projections or actuals? I'm curious, for all of you, do you think, because we've debated this on the product team, we're like, is the submitter the person best suited to fill this out, or is it an evaluator? Is it somebody on the sponsor's team? Who do you think would be best suited to fill out these projections and actuals?
Does it have to be just one person? Like, I mean,
It wouldn't have to be. Do you have thoughts on that?
For us, probably not. I would say probably not the person that's a project submitter. I know that for each business line, they each have like a finance group, more or less, that would want to be the ones that would update those financials, but they already have a system that they do that in, and we don't want to create waste or redundant work by having them fill it out in one system, then come fill it out in ours. That's why I asked the question of, is there a way to kind of scrape data and put it into Bright Ideas so we can make sure the systems are matching up? We can pull special reports for us without having to do multiple pulls.
So that finance team that you mentioned, that's at the project level, right? So they're running the numbers on the project, but they wouldn't then go and say the initiative costed this. They're like, just want to make sure that that part's clear, that they can't be held, they won't be held accountable for your program. So just making sure that at some point, whatever the data they calculate, you're taking that and you're building more into it, right?
I don't know if I'm building more into it. It's more like they have specialized systems they already use to do project tracking, project costing, return on investment, all that kind of stuff for ideas, projects, anything the bank does, right? But we would want to make sure that Bright Idea is matching with those systems.
Sure.
Because we use Bright Idea to literally track the progress of projects through the entire development process.
Right, so the mechanics of getting that data in either through a file upload or API is what you're asking for.
You can attach files as well. For example, if you had an Excel spreadsheet or some documentation from another team, you can attach that directly in that business impact tab, so you have that as a reference.
It's always being updated.
Gotcha.
Like you were saying, it always changes.
Yep.
There's more manual steps to attach, delete, stuff
Yep,
like that.
gotcha.
Stephanie, did you have one first?
Question?
Yeah.
Yeah. With the new developed workspace from yesterday, how does that tie in? Because, previously you were able to, create from the idea a project, right?
Yep.
And didn't have to go to a new challenge or app. How does it work now regarding the business impact tab? Does it tie together to that new workspace? Or do I have to create a whole new app and then ultimately track the impact there? Do they talk to one another, is, I guess, in summary?
So the business, the team workspace, and specifically, I'm assuming you mean the business model elements, right? So there's the little revenue and there's a little cost section.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, that's not directly tied into business impact, but I wouldn't say that what you're going to plug in there, at least from my perspective in terms of using business model canvas structure, that's not what you're going to be plugging, potentially as a projection to be defined. It's not feeding directly into though. Perhaps that's something that we would want to consider to be defined, I guess. But as a current business impact as an area on the idea level is separated from the team workspace areas. However, you can turn them, and if I'm not mistaken, you can turn them on.
This tab is available in Team Workspace.
But it's not the same as the little revenue box in the business model, right?
Oh, I'm talking about the tab.
Oh,
Not
okay,
necessarily
go.
the business model canvas.
This tab is available. And the 11:30 session in the tab has more about that.
Okay, okay, cool.
Continuity. And
Hey, George. Just want to piggyback on the question back there. Being in the federal, the government public sector space, I mean, I can see that this is very useful for, the for profits, but in the non-profit space, it's more around reputational management, risk management, knowledge sharing, policy effectiveness. It's all those soft factors which really I think we need a lot of, help with. Because there's definitely opportunity there, and there's not that many sort of, potential soft benefits. Or the other one is like, how do you measure staying relevant and being ahead of the curve? Like for example, there's huge opportunity out there, like blockchain, leveraging blockchain for like taxation, for example, where you can sort of but you can't put a cost or a potential gain on that just yet. But yet you need to spend some sort of investment in time to figure that out.
it's a very deep question. Yeah, I definitely don't have any answer that's like, okay, we're done here. For sure, depending on what so that's a metrics question perhaps, at least the second piece in terms of, are we focusing on are we ahead of the curve? What metrics to use to signify that? I mean, ROI is focused on your program. As a overall business, you're not going to be telling, oh, yeah, our competitor, the return on investment on our innovation program is, 5 billion, maybe you would, or 100 million, right? That's a whole different scope, I believe. Now, if you want to be tracking the soft benefits, or whatever you might, like soft plus elements, there isn't a layer, like you can plug in, it doesn't need to be just numbers, you can plug in, I think you can barely see it here, but the non-financials, there's an area for that, but I can't, this isn't going to cover for all the possible metrics. That's a much deeper question, I think.
Yeah, but there's also a space where, you're in that lean startup,
Mm-hmm.
you're in that lean sort of startup mode, where you don't know until you don't know, and you're iterating and you're finding things out,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's also sort of hard to cover.
Well, the iterations for sure, the revisions, and specifically for the financials, you're going to definitely be able to plug those in. If you're running lean on any project, you can keep tracking and enhance projection, whatever it is, you'll always have the updates. But if you're going beyond that, if you're looking at intangible metrics and exactly how to quantify them, I don't have those answers.
We're happy to work.
I hope so. We got one, U.S. Bank, 18. Let's go for 25 next year.
All right, so you mentioned that, in that graph, there's a sunken cost in the beginning, right, until you realize your ROI. Do you know of any examples or ways to measure depreciation? Because, you could go through your subject matter expert evaluation, get, the top idea you want to implement, but sometimes it gets stuck in a prioritization queue, right, or a roadmap until it actually gets executed. So, any thoughts there?
The starting point that we've thought about is the risk-adjusted NPV. Now, in terms of depreciation, so I'm not a finance expert. That's a level, I think we're going back to the metrics themselves rather than the method of tracking. Risk-adjusted NPV, I think, is a starting point. So, like, your startups, I think, will apply like 40% or some crazy, not crazy. If you think that there's a high risk behind a project, then you can adjust for that risk and plug in a lower or potentially lower valuation of that project. It's not prescriptive, right? I can't give you a perfect answer.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm not a finance person either. That's
That's maybe where you have to ask those finance folks exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, there's someone in the business that has these kinds of answers in terms of what would be the best approach in terms of the number. Definitely speak with them, speak with the project teams. You're speaking with all, as program managers, you're not meant to know everything, but you definitely have the people that can answer those questions in your business, I hope.
Naveen Kunde from Clorox again. I've been noodling this a little bit, and there's a front end of innovation which is a lot fuzzier and open-ended, a lot harder to measure. NPV, risk-adjusted NPV, whatever you might call it. It's more about engagement, culture, number of ideas, etc. And for the back end of execution, innovation, more execution-related stuff where you can measure some things like that, or cost savings projects. I'm wondering if there are two little pieces here that we need to start thinking about measuring and reporting ROI on. The costs are easier to measure, but the results are a little fuzzier depending on what you're trying to do and the challenge you're trying to execute on. So just wanted to throw that out, and I'm happy to work with Bright Idea. Our team is happy to work with Bright Idea on that because we're getting support from the C-suite on these two buckets. One is hardcore business results related challenges, but the other is the people and culture challenges, because they want to drive engagement and entrepreneurial culture, innovation culture, whatever you want to call it. And you're still taking up people's time and bandwidth, and we have to figure out what is the balance between the two types of challenges that we want to
I absolutely agree. This is my perspective after however many engagements, more than 30 experiences with 30 different clients. Culture is one of the most important foundations to any program. If you have an open culture, a culture of experimentation, a culture of taking at least some risk, a culture of communication, there's a lot of benefits there that you can go down the path of quantifying, but you'll see it. The program will speak in other ways of just submissions, collaboration. There's other metrics that have nothing to do potentially with ROI that will show that happening or that existing. Culture is, I think, one of the most important starting points in seeing what kind of culture you have and if it needs to change, and there's completely different tactics for that versus just running a challenge. That's never going to be enough. Tracking it, for sure, I think is also important. Right now we're starting with the hard metrics, the financials. But my personal opinion, culture is step one. If you have it, you're going to be successful. If you don't, you need to fix it. And that's not like launch a program and we're done. Launch a challenge, it's nowhere near that. It starts from the top, also from the bottom, from the sides. If you use Eric's, it's everywhere, basically.
Yeah, and again, I don't mean to just say that all those soft challenges are culture related. There are a lot of front end of innovation things that are ideas that are high quality ideas, which may not lead to anything, but then lead to something else, which then leads to something else, and so on. So there are fuzzier things that happen in the innovation funnel than can be measured, which is why one of your objections was this innovation, how can you measure it? You hear that more often because from people on the front end. So I just wanted to throw that. It's not just about culture. Culture is an easy one to kind of make sweeping statements about, but there are more challenges at the front end that might be fuzzier to measure.
Agreed. Starting point is the project. Now, if you want to start going back, I'm all for it. But at least at the project level, when we've made the selection and the fuzzy bits are a little bit more clear, at least start there. There's a lot of people that are not doing any of that, right? I mean, I could.
Great work, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
I'm just saying it's complex.
I absolutely agree. 4.5 months is a scratch, is a drop in the ocean. Mr. Nick Selk.
I'll just say one quick thing about the culture. One of the easiest things you can do is just ask somebody what they mean by culture, right? So you see it a lot, right? People go like, how do I change the culture? Well, first start asking them, what do they mean by that, right? So like, define what is culture. Do you guys want to like have more collaboration, right? And then you can track that, right? So like, ask them to define what they want as a culture. Is it, okay, we have to take on more risk and we whatever, risk tolerance. Well, you can start to calculate that stuff now. So if you just actually ask the question, what do you mean by changing the culture? You can actually start to get metrics on it pretty easy.
One of my favorite, and this is the last thing I'll say, one of my favorite metrics is, I think it was called like kill rate ratio or something like that, which basically means, in a different way, it means how often are you killing projects that should be killed, right? That at some point you have to make a call on any individual project at any given time, and some of them should not progress. And there's a thing that happens there where it's like, well, we tried, we put all this time and money in it, we just keep going, and you're dumping more money and more time. And there's a point where you actually should not do that, right? And that, like, there's a risk tolerance of like, are we willing to kill projects that are 6 months down the line, but for a good reason, right? That's a very higher level metric in terms of, okay, do we have comments? Ideally, we could get there, but I mean, that's one of my favorite, kill rate. All right, we're at the clock. Ah, yes, I almost, and Brian didn't remind me, Brian.
That's what all those signals were.
But I'm at the behest of all of you now. You will rate me. Please do rate the workshop. It's very important for us. Thank you all. Feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.